Welcome everyone that's probably watching on Eskay stream as well as mine. Today we have Eskay and myself interviewing Gavin and Morgan. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a senior engineer on Team 4. I mostly work on matchmaking these days, but I've also helped out with like the ranked Comp 2.0 feature that we shipped. I've been on the team for almost 5 years, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'm Gavin Winter. You can just call me Winter. There are too many Gavins on the team. I joined Team 4 in early 2021, so I've been around for a little while. I'm a systems designer, so that means not a hero designer. That means I don't do balance or anything like that. My main contribution to Overwatch 2 launch was the ping system, the work I did there. I've also worked on challenges. I worked on competitive mystery heroes recently, and I'm actually going to do a minor spoiler for something coming in season 4. I didn't mention this to you guys, but I've been working on something we call stranded spawn. So that's kind of like fixing the problem of getting back spawned in sad spawn rooms and then not getting to be with your team as much. But before we get started, I want to do a quick shout out to Morgan. So like just to talk about the way that we work together, our most common interaction is I will DM Morgan on Slack and be like, hey, can you take a look at this match with me? Because you creators, people online are constantly forwarding us matches that, we see bad matches happen and we want to look at those and break those down. So like that tends to be the way that he and I talk the most, but we talk constantly about this stuff. So Morgan does all the actual hard work on this system. He's the actual smart person in the room, just to be super clear about that.
That's a team effort, Gavin.
Okay, all right. For Overwatch 2 launch, one of our main goals with matchmaking, Morgan has said this before, but I just want to reiterate, was to improve queue times. Because like in Overwatch 1, one of the biggest complaints we had was bad queue times. For season 1 and 2, we feel like we did mostly solve that. But like since launch, Morgan has been doing a lot of like incredible work to set us up for future improvements. And then speaking briefly to those improvements, because obviously they didn't go the way we wanted in season 3, we do want to apologize for those bad matches that happened in season 3, those wider matches. That was never our goal. It was never our goal to have like a plat in a GM game. That should have never happened. That was an unintended side effect of those improvements, like those structural changes. It's all like a super complex system, and that part of it caught us off guard, I would say. So we'll get a lot of benefits out of those improvements going forward, and we can talk more about those as we answer questions. But yeah, we do just want to apologize for those, and then I'll hand it over to Jay and Eskay.
Awesome. No worries. I had like one of the questions that we were gonna ask today was actually like in that what you were talking about. But Eskay, would you like to start, or would you like me to start?
I think I can get the first question.
Sure.
Okay. The first one is winners queue and losers queue real? How can people go on huge loss streaks where every game feels unwinnable, and then huge win streaks where every game feels unlosable?
That's a good question. So there's no winners queue or losers queue. It's all the same queue. We only have one queue. Well, one queue per thing that you can click on, right? Ultimately, like it's actually really weird. So when you look at like how often people actually go on like 10 loss streaks or 10 win streaks, it's pretty rare, and it actually happens about as often as you would expect if you were just flipping coins. The problem is it still happens, like you can flip 10 heads in a row and that still happens, and it feels horrible, right? Like I actually, this happened to me over Christmas break, I think, where it was like I went like 1-9 one night, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? But we're looking at it. Our data analyst June, she's been doing some investigation to try to like help us understand what's going on, because it's not intentional. Like actually our goal is to make it less likely than chance that you're going on like a win or loss streak, because your rating's moving in response to you winning or losing. So she did some initial investigation. We're still kind of early in this. We're still trying to understand what happens, but kind of I think at least my suspicion is there's like a lot of different things that can cause this. Like for example, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but like sometimes if you play at like different times of day or like weekend versus weekdays,
Well, yeah, I
the
could tell the weekend.
population. What?
I
What?
was gonna say I could tell the weekend queues are oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it feels different, right?
Yeah.
And when there's like a different population of people playing, that actually changes kind of like what MMR means, because MMR is just a measure of like the relative skill of everybody who's kind of like playing with each other. And so you'll notice that like if you normally play like only on weekends and then play on a weekday, or only play on evenings and then play, earlier in the day, um, you might feel miscalibrated. And we're still trying to figure out like, even quantifying like how much of that is the problem versus there's probably like five other things that could be causing that too. And long term, I think hopefully we can kind of pick up on the, it's like if you're going 1 and 9 or whatever, like probably something's wrong and we should be adapting faster. We're just not quite that smart yet, so it's like, figuring that out.
And,
Yeah,
oh,
there's another thing there. There is this top 500 specific phenomenon, and I know that like I'm sure everybody watching today is top 500, so this probably applies to you. But it's possible that like at some off times that everyone in queue is worse than you according to the matchmaker. So we've seen, like I guess everybody's probably seen Sureforce rant, but like, there are these moments where if you're in like the top 10 players, we might not be able to give you a better player, especially if you're playing at 3 a.m. So that could make you feel like you're in a loser's queue, but that is a pretty specific situation.
yeah, but I don't expect that, especially at
Right.
3 a.m. Like all the best players are gonna be out there. But I have noticed that one thing that you guys said is that I usually do morning streams and night streams, and usually my morning stream. Well, this is more in Overwatch 1, not necessarily Overwatch 2 right now, but in Overwatch 1, my morning streams would be like, it's okay. It's like a bunch of people who are at work, whatever. I'm streaming, but nighttime queues are like so much more sweaty than the morning because you have all the Overwatch League players and like you have a lot more people off of work and whatnot. So it does. I think the time of day, like you were saying, it does is like a huge impact as well. And it's funny that you said you have to be very unlucky to like go on these huge win streaks or loss streaks, because I won 5 in a row on Friday and then I lost 9 in a row. So
Oh, yeah, that's painful.
yeah, that was very pain.
I feel for you.
It
Yeah,
feels like
hopefully we
there's
can make it better.
it feels like there's a lot less win streaks and loss streaks this season than there was the seasons before. Because with season 1 and 2, I felt like I was always win streak, loss streak, win streak, loss streak, win streak, loss streak. But now it's
Oh,
pretty even.
that's really good to hear. I mean, we have made some kind of like first steps at trying to improve. According to the statistics we've seen, we haven't really like really meaningfully bent the curve down of like that long tail of really bad win and loss streaks. A lot of it also is potentially just, we added a lot of new players to the game, so there's just kind of a lot more uncertainty in the system in total. If you think about like Overwatch 1, like, right before we shipped Overwatch 2, like the people who were still playing Overwatch 1 at that point, it was like everybody had played hundreds of hours. It was all like our very hardcore dedicated players. And now like, there's like a lot more new players that we just really don't know anything about. So it's like I kind of imagine like we haven't actually visualized this, but I'm kind of imagining like the uncertainty about ratings kind of like sloshing around in the system, and we're still trying to kind of like push that down and get everything kind of as good as it can be.
Okay, and that goes into my next question, because a lot of people are actually saying it in chat, and I want to hear what your thoughts are. So what do you guys have to say about the people who claim forced 50-50 is real?
Yeah, that's a funny one. So there's no forcing. Whenever we make a match, what we do at that point is we're just looking at what your rating is at that moment, right? So we don't know if you've won 5 games in a row or lost 5 games in a row. That's completely invisible to that part of the matchmaker that's just looking at like, we have these 10 players, let's try to make it this match. What you'll notice is if a new player comes in and they're winning more than 50% of their matches, their rating is going to be going up, right? Because obviously they're like or they're better than we think they are, right? Because at the end of the day, if you win a match, your rating goes up, and if you lose a match, your rating goes down. The amount that you go up or down is a little more complicated. But ultimately, it's like if you're winning like 60% of your matches, your rating's going to be going up. Once you get your rating to kind of where it's supposed to be, you will naturally end up winning and losing about 50% of the time, because otherwise your rating would still keep moving, right? So that's kind of like the natural end point of once your rating is kind of calibrated. But we're not forcing it. Like there's nothing that's like, oh, you won 2 matches, so now we're going to force you to lose. We don't do anything like that. That's just kind of how the system naturally ends up working.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay, the next.
Hopefully I've convinced at least a few people. I don't know.
I don't think you've convinced them, but you explained it. So
you explained it. Convincing.
They can't be convinced.
I can't even convince anyone to do it. Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah. That was a good explanation. The next one's kind of already answered at the beginning, but it's, did the system increase how many skill divisions players can be a part in each match? Because in Overwatch 1, it was super rare to have a diamond in a GM lobby.
Yeah, so ultimately, this number has not changed a whole lot. Well, outside of when we shipped Season 3. When we shipped Season 3, it got way worse at Grandmaster, and that was kind of unintended, and then we fixed it, and then we broke it again, and we fixed it again.
There was some fixing and some breaking,
yeah. And actually last night we just made another config change that may have made it a little bit worse. So actually after this call, I'll probably be taking a look at that and making some more adjustments accordingly. But ultimately, like kind of that range, we don't really get to control that range too much, because much of that is dictated more by just for non-Grandmaster, it's mostly dictated by things like grouping. At Grandmaster, it's largely dictated by just how many people are online. But like if you look at like that curve, it's very consistent from Overwatch 1. Still, we would like to make it better. At Grandmaster, it's going to be hard to do, but it would be great to make it better. A lot of it you'll notice, before Season 4 anyways, the way that ranks work, your rank is not 100% tied to your rating, right? It kind of moves towards it. But we do these, they're like rank decay at the beginning of the season. So I think the perception of the issue is a lot worse than it actually is. That said, it's still a problem that we want to make as good as we possibly can. I think last I checked, if you look at a match that has like a GM1 in it, I think about 1% of the time it'll have as far down as a Diamond 1 in it. So that's like our 1%. It's going to be that bad.
And those tend to be off hours. Those were the 3 a.m. games that where GM was playing, and there weren't other choices.
Those are mostly edge cases.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense though, because at 3 a.m. there's not a lot of people queuing, and especially how you guys said it was kind of interesting. Like you said, for the GM1 players or the GM players, like it's based on like who's online, and I was actually kind of curious to, like I don't know if this is like something that you guys have. Let me see. Oh, never mind. I lost track. Never mind.
No problem.
It's all good.
I'll probably think of it again.
Let us know if you think of it.
Sorry, you go.
No, you go. I had like a brain fart. Chat,
I will say it's really cool to know how often you guys are actually updating changes to this matchmaker, because like we don't really know.
I brain farted.
Unless it's in a patch note, but it's really cool to see how often it is.
Yeah, that's actually going forward. We're gonna try to put matchmaking changes into patch notes more often. We had never really thought to do that, but it turns out people are interested, right? So that's been actually really cool. Like now we're now it's like, okay, how do we describe, like we made this weird change, how do we actually even describe it? It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, fair.
Yeah. You guys good on that one? I could go to the next one, sorry. So this is a very I've actually been wondering this one for a very long time, so I kind of want to ask it. So should you be able to have people on your team that you shouldn't be able to queue with? So for an example, if I'm GM1 and I'm top 500, and I like should I be able to get a GM5 in my team, or like, because let's say if I want to group up with Eskay and I can't group up with Eskay because Eskay's GM5, or I'm GM5, but then like we solo queue and then Eskay's on my team, like should that be allowed to happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's super unintuitive, right? You would expect like, okay, if we're restricting groups to this amount, why are we making matches wider than that amount, right? It's it's weird. Let me use an example of like at gold level, because gold is, I think, actually gold is more egregious in this sense. So at like anywhere below diamond, right, or diamond or below, you're able to group 2 ranks apart, right? So a diamond can group with a gold. Let's say you have a 3 stack that's like a diamond to a gold level 3 stack. And let's say you have another 3 stack that's like, you know, high platinum to high silver or something like that. So like, you know, maybe you've got these 2 parties and maybe they're like this, where the middle two players match each other really well, but the bottom 2 players are wider. In that case, that's actually a set of parties that we probably want to put against each other, because one, they're both 3 stacks. They're both wide parties, and we want to kind of put wide parties together, because the alternative, right, is putting each of those 3 stacks that are wide 3 stacks against solos or something, right? And that means more solos are getting in matches that are wide, and we obviously want to minimize that as much as possible. So in that case, even though the bounds get expanded beyond, you know, 2 ranks, it's probably better for the system overall for us to put those 2 parties against each other. And so that's kind of a lot of the problem. Like a lot of where the really, really wide matches come from is usually us trying to put parties together. Because ultimately, like, you know, if you're queuing solo, we want to give you as many solo matches as possible, like matches with all solos, because those are going to be the best matches. So ultimately, and then I guess at grandmaster level, it's so it's funny, you know, like what I was saying, like, you know, 1% of the time you get like a diamond in your GM1 match. That is way worse at gold. That bound, like if you look at the spread of MMRs, the GM players actually have it better than anybody else because of the extreme grouping restrictions. Yeah, you wouldn't expect this. It's kind of unintuitive, but at gold, it's much wider. Like the you know, average GM match is a narrower band of skill than the average gold match.
In fairness to GMs, though, you know, a lot of the time they're going to feel it more. They're going to notice the mistakes. The gold player might not necessarily notice the mistakes that someone's making that makes them silver, you know, but they might.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because every time I try to compare like between like groups is like a diamond player, no offense to diamond players, but a diamond player and a GM lobby, there's a huge like, you know, skill gap.
You can really tell.
Yeah, you can really tell. So it's about that makes a lot more sense. Would you like me to go again, or?
Oh wait, I got this one. But
Okay.
how much of the recent plat in GM lobby is decay or like new accounts versus actual real plats?
Yeah. So back to that apology part. It's mostly decay, but it has happened. We know it's happened. We've seen it happen in some games, some of our own games. But when I say mostly decay, to break that down, here's why it is mostly decay. So let's say we have a GM player from Overwatch 1, and you know they didn't play in season 1 or season 2, right? Like they skipped that, and they appear in season 3, which is actually very plausible because we have like millions of players, right? They would have. I don't know if you guys, you know, I'm sure Jay and Eskay, you know, you saw your initial ranks when you logged in, but if you've watched all your favorite streamers, like when they first logged into Overwatch 1, they were very decayed. down to a lower rank in that first moment. And so that's still true of those players returning today. So like if they're coming back in season 3, or they barely played season 1 or 2, if they played like 10 games in season 1 or 2, that was not enough for their ranks to converge, for their MMR and their SR to converge. So they still look very low. And that's where most of these cases I've investigated are that, but not all of them. So again, apologies for that.
Yeah,
That makes
hopefully in season 4, it'll be easier. Like everybody's ranks will be their actual rating at that point. And so, at that point, once you see these problems, then you can be sure that it's actually, really
Yeah.
wide matches. So hopefully it gets, the problem looks a lot better in season 4.
I think in season 4 as well, you guys said there's not going to be any MMR DK at the beginning of the season, right?
That is true.
SR decay, right?
SR
So
decay, sorry.
SR decay, yes.
MMR decay is not going away, so that means if you don't play Overwatch for a year, you will decay.
Okay.
But SR decay going away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
And the SR decay was much more aggressive, like, because we were trying to like move you down so that you could like go back up through the season. MMR decay is much more like, we've got models of how, if you don't play Overwatch for a year, we kind of have a sense of like how far down, and that's also like, how we increase our uncertainty about
they
you.
told
There's
you
kind of
MMR
like,
decay is real. If they literally just said if you guys don't play for a
That's
year
stupid.
and you guys come back to the
I think
game,
You must be
muted.
talking to chat.
oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
because
probably.
they don't understand the concept that if I don't play Overwatch for a year and I come back to the game, I still should be a top 500 player. I'm not. If I take a year off, I'm gonna be trash. Like chat. Chat.
You
makes
won't
me-
be bronze, but like you'll be lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have
But
a
we
follow-up.
also
Like
increase our
you guys
uncertainty a
are
lot. Oh,
that
sorry, go
dumb.
ahead.
No, sorry. Basically, if someone gets to rank 1, they're like 4,700 or whatever, the highest. Wouldn't that, if SR decay is gone between seasons, wouldn't that mean there's a lot less like really high ranked players playing because they won't need to play as much in the next seasons going on because they're always just at that super high rank?
Yeah, we've been talking about this. I guess you're kind of thinking about like leaderboard camping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the 25 games to appear there is still there.
I'm mad
but
at you,
We're
chat.
changing it to
You
25
guys are
wins,
Papega.
actually.
25 wins. Thank you, Morgan.
So
Sorry.
we are gonna make it, take more
Yeah,
time to get on the leaderboard.
50-ish
Right.
games. So for each account you want to camp the leaderboard with, you'll need to play, a decent amount of games. And that does give your, MMR a chance to change again. Like if you're going to need to win quite a lot, right? So
That's a good change. I like that. Okay.
That is also something I think that we're just a little bit, we're gonna kind of wait and see. And if it turns out to be a problem, you can definitely expect us to be, figuring out some sort of solution for that.
for sure.
Awesome.
So my next question is going to be because there's been a lot of talk about this recently, and a lot of people have been especially when I look at profiles. So do you guys believe in like this rank inflation that's been going around, being tossed around? Like, how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah. So there's actually a couple things going on, and I'm sorry. Actually, if we had realized how visible some of the effects of these things would be, we would have probably messaged this out more, because we don't want to keep players in the dark. In season 3, we fixed a bug where we realized we were actually being too harsh. Like everybody's ranks were lower than what they should have been, even if you play a lot of matches. Kind of like, you can think of it as like the entire population was shifted down.
In what season? Sorry.
In season 3. So at the beginning of
Oh.
season 3.
We
Okay.
fixed it.
Okay.
we
Because in 1 and 2 it was
bug.
deflated.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Ooh.
like, basically what we realized was like, the people who were supposed to be like, Diamond 1 were actually like Diamond 3 or something like that. So we pushed everybody up a little bit to hit like the target that we had for each rank. But yeah, like I said, we didn't realize how significant that would look. So sorry about that. There's a second thing which is actually still a bug, but that's going to be fixed in season 4. And that does cause a little bit of inflation at the very high end. So probably there's like slightly more GM1s than there should be. Like people who are like GM2 are actually, some people are in GM1. That's kind of like this weird side effect of how the rank update system works. Like, because right now, we like decay your rank and then you kind of like move up. And so it's kind of this, it's a weird side effect of like how your rank moves up towards your rating, that like once you get close to your rating, you have like a little bit of wiggle room. So like if you go on a win streak, you kind of like, you're actually above your rating. So you get a little bit inflated. That'll all go away in season 4 because we're just going to be like, here's your rating. Your rank is the equivalent of your rating. So yeah, sorry about that too. We actually didn't catch that until more recently. But yeah, hopefully things will feel a lot saner in season 4.
Oh, you guys are fine. You don't have to keep saying sorry. You're
Yeah,
good.
yeah. No, no.
I mean, I feel bad when we find bugs like that because I know the community really cares about exactly what rank they are and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we want it to feel as
Um,
stable as possible.
Some care all too much.
Yeah.
That's you, chat.
True.
Your
I
turn.
have a follow-up that I might be like out of line, so if it is, don't answer it. But like, do you think the standard for GM now is a bit lower than it was in Overwatch 1 because of this rank shift?
That's an interesting question. So another thing that I don't think we've talked about yet is because like GM is based on your rating. When Overwatch 2 came out, we welcomed a whole lot of new players to the game. The total population grew, and as a result, we actually have a lot more GMs now than we did in Overwatch 1, strictly as a result of larger population, because
Right.
GM is like a small percentage of the very top of players, but it is a percentage, right? So, or at least it ends up being a percentage based on how the system works. And so there are more GMs now. I don't know if I can really say. Maybe Gavin has more of an opinion. I don't think I really have a strong opinion on whether they're deserved or not, though, because ultimately it's all going to be a little relative, right? Because it's relative to the
Ooh.
population.
Well, I mean, that's super complicated, right? Because
Yeah.
Overwatch 2 is not Overwatch 1. What it took to be good at Overwatch 1 is not the same skill set that it took to be good at
That's a really
Overwatch
good
2.
point.
There are people that are great shooter players that are doing better in Overwatch 2 because they don't have to play the same double shield lineup and stuff like that. So like it's just apples to oranges in a lot of ways. And so like some people are going to rise to GM that were, like hardstock masters before, and then there's also the fact that, like Morgan said, it's a percentage. So we're capturing a percentage, and if you capture a percentage of a bigger number, that's more people. So
Right.
complex.
Yeah,
That's really
Top
cool.
500 will always be 500, though. Will
True,
always be.
true,
Right,
true.
right.
I always wanted to ask, like, I don't think you guys can answer it, but everyone used to say, oh, the GM used to be like the top 1% of the game, but I don't like who knows if it's still the top 1%. But like you guys said, like more people are gonna be able to, it's a different type of shooter. You're not shooting at 2 shields anymore. It's one less tank. It's a different game. So
I actually just saw a question in your chat. I want to address Jay. They said, "How is it a different game, but the MMR is the same?" Great question. That's why we applied so much uncertainty to the MMR going into Overwatch 2. That's why when we have a system of uncertainty that lets us say, do we really believe in this rating? And when we switched over, we said we believe a lot less in everybody's rating. So we use them as a starting point, but we really quickly changed what we felt about a lot of players.
okay.
That's really cool.
Yeah, if you see any interesting questions in either or chat, just feel free to answer it.
Yep.
Um,
You can take the
Put
next
it in
one,
the
Jay.
chats.
I'll take the next one. So I have a very interesting one. And this is probably going to be a hot topic. What do you guys have to... Oh, sorry, let me read it. What do you say about the people who want shorter queue times versus the people who want more balanced games?
Oh wait, that's you skipped 3 questions.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
but...
no.
Oh,
sorry,
but
you can go there.
I thought these were mine. So I, like the ones I...
Sorry,
I was gonna...
What do you guys want?
We're
Just
covering it up. We're
shoot.
covering it up.
This is the question I thought of, and I thought I was gonna read all mine first.
Oh wait, I got it back. Wait, but we haven't asked these 3 that I just highlighted.
You want me to read it?
And
I
then
can read it.
one of them before them is like the one you asked is like a follow up to the one before it, so it's like
Oh,
sorry.
We have questions, chat.
Yeah.
I have my questions I wanted to ask. Okay, I can
Sorry,
read.
let's go.
No, you're
My
fine. You're
bad.
fine. I guess this one's the next one.
This one. But you can ask that one, and we can skip the one before because it's kind of already been answered.
The suspense is killing me. What are they gonna ask?
It could be anything, Maureen.
Yeah.
You sure you want me to skip it?
You can just ask it.
Skip
We
it.
can-
Don't skip
we
it.
can
Just ask
always-
it. Let's go.
Is there going to be a fix for the inflated numbers going on? For an example, the people who have been gold for 6 seasons in Overwatch 1 and still gold for Overwatch 2, Season 1 and 2, but now magically Masters or GM 5 now in Season 3.
Yeah, so I think we already talked about the causes. I have not seen anybody who was gold and went to GM? That sounds a little
I
bit
said Masters, but
a
I
little
think
bit ridiculous. If somebody has an actual example of that, I'd be interested to look. Because like from my perspective, this should be like very small. This is like a couple divisions. This shouldn't be like several ranks. So I would assume that, maybe they were playing other shooters and got a lot better, or something. I don't really have I have no idea for how our system could do anything like that.
yeah, to just summarize, GM inflation, kind of real. Other inflation, not inflation. It's actually
Yeah,
was
yeah.
deflation.
Yeah, anybody who's below like GM3 isn't really inflated, at least based on the based on our current ranks. If we look in aggregate.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, next one.
Nothing above GM.
How many people are Grandmaster 1? Is it even feasible to have frequent matches where everyone is GM1 and not playing with the same people over and over again?
Yeah, so I can't tell you the exact number, but I can tell you it's a fair bit lower than 1% is Grandmaster, and GM1 is like a very tiny fraction of a percent. It's like very, 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 very negligible. It's a very elite group of players, right? And because of that, ultimately,
You heard that, chat?
it's extremely hard to ensure that we can match only GM1s because, like, a lot of the time there's just not that many of them online.
Right.
Ultimately, we could eventually get to a point maybe where like we know that a GM match is about to finish, and so maybe we like hold some players in queue. We could get a lot smarter about that kind of thing.
Oh, that's I never even thought about that.
Oh yeah, there's like so many tricks we could, but
Wow.
but anyways, the at the end of the day, like there's going to be a lot of times of day when like there's just not actually enough GMs online that like ping well to the same data center.
Right.
That it's really, really hard to kind of ensure that. We do make matches. There's like a smallish percent of matches, maybe 10 or 20% of GM1 matches that like actually have pretty much all GM1s in it. It's just super, super rare. I wish we could make it higher, and I hope we can.
Gotcha. Everyone should just never get off the game so we can all have good matches.
True. I can ask this original one, right? Or you want me to ask this one first?
Wait, can I?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just ask this one, and then the next one's like the
it basically
follow-up.
follows
Okay.
it up, yeah.
So, what's the team's philosophy around wait time versus even matchups?
That's an interesting one. I think I'll want to hear Gavin's opinion on this too. But so from the engineering side, I mean, ultimately, like we want kind of both, right? Like we want good matches and we want short queue times. And I think I would imagine most people kind of want that. Ultimately, like it's kind of a complicated trade-off because like I can't just make it like if I make everybody wait in queue for like an additional 30 seconds, we'll get like a little bit of match quality. But I can't just keep doing that forever. Actually, last night we probably made queue times a little bit too fast. We did some config changes yesterday, and I think we made queue times too fast, which is mostly an issue for parties, for groups, not for solos. Solos can generally have very fast queue times, and there's really not like a whole lot of benefit that we get from holding solos in queue for longer. For parties, it's nice because then we get to cluster parties better together. So ultimately making parties wait a little bit longer for kind of like a match that's both better for them and also like healthier for the system as a whole is very important. But and like at GM, their queue times are a little bit more proportional to match quality because like like I was saying, if we like make everybody wait longer, we can potentially get enough like GM1s to make a GM1 match. But for the most part, it's actually it's like not straightforward. Like somebody asked for like a slider, right, of like, match quality to like queue times. And it's like, it actually doesn't exactly work because like if you're queuing as like a solo player, like your match quality is really not dependent on your queue time. It's mostly dependent on kind of like everybody else's queue times and like what the system as a whole is doing. And so it's tricky. Ultimately, I think we can make better matches without making queue times worse. That's mostly like making the matchmaker more sophisticated. And also being able to make an informed decision about like, we know that if we wait for a few more minutes, we can make a better match for this player. Right now we don't do that. We're not sophisticated enough. We're kind of like implicitly making that decision, but we don't have like a really, really intentional decision-making process behind that. Like if we knew that we could hold this GM1 player in queue for another 5 minutes and make them a better match, I would absolutely do that. But right now we just don't have that like foresight. So yeah, well, that's the kind of stuff that we'll be working on in the future. But ultimately it'll be hard.
I can't imagine that being easy to do. Holding like a
No,
specific person.
that's kind of tricky.
Yeah, I can't imagine it.
Yeah, I was just going to say from a design standpoint, we want what Morgan said at the start. We want to have our cake and eat it. We want both of those things, match quality and fast match times, right? But like, I think that what we hear from the community mostly, and this is a nuanced answer because like mostly we hear people would rather wait in queue longer for better matches, but a lot of the time that's coming from competitive players that so like different queues have different requirements. We hear a lot of over season 3, since we made these foundational changes to matchmaking, we've heard a ton of feedback from people that play in wide parties. We've seen wide matchmaking in season 3, but wide parties are a thing too. In quick play, we have bronze players queuing with grandmaster players sometimes. That's a thing, and then we have to put them in a game, right? So like those queue times were really bad in season 3, and so like we got a lot of complaints from parties like that said, why am I waiting so long? Why am I in queue for 15 minutes? The reason is because your party is weird, and so it depends on who is asking for what.
Okay. And I was just gonna go into like you were kind of answering the next question is like, what do you say about the people who want a shorter queue time versus the people who want longer queue times for the games to be more balanced? So
I guess I kind of touched on that a little bit, where it's like ultimately it's very difficult to like I said, as like a solo player, if you're not in like GM, your queue time is not actually very correlated with match quality at all. It's mostly a result of like, are you playing at like peak hours? Are you, are there like a lot of like wide groups online? There's like a lot of factors like that kind of like dictate kind of the dynamic that the matchmaker is in right now and like what types of matches we're making. And most of the time, like if you're a solo queuing, we're not actually making a match around you, we're making a match around somebody else in that match, because you're only 10% of the players in that match. And so most of the time, it's not you who waited a long time, it's somebody else.
Oh.
So the system fundamentally doesn't have like, there's not like, I don't just have like a knob that I can be like, oh, let's like increase queue times and make match quality better. It's a lot more complicated than that. And ultimately, a lot of like the match quality advantages come from kind of more of these dynamics of like, how good of an average match are we making, and that kind of dictates like how long parties are waiting in queue, and it all kind of like, it kind of settles out. It's a little
Actually,
bit hard to
Morgan,
explain.
that knob would be really useful to have. We should get Chris to task that in Jira. We need
Oh
that.
yeah,
We
yeah.
need that knob, Morgan, please.
I think actually, to be honest, we'll get there. Like
Wait,
in
my name's
I don't know,
Chris.
a year or two. Like the way that we're building, we'll eventually get to the point where we really do have something that's as simple as a knob, but it's just horribly complicated right now.
Sorry, yeah, I'm giving Morgan a hard time.
No, it's all
Yeah,
good.
from my side of this, the foundational changes we were talking about at the start of season 3, the stuff that we did that gave us some problems, also does have a good side that we haven't seen a ton of use out of yet. But like that will give us the ability to add more parameters and more nuance to the matchmaker in the future. So like there was a reason we did that, and the reason things got worse unintentionally again is we want to be able to make it smarter.
Yeah, we kind of had to break it to make it better,
Right.
I didn't have to break it.
Well, okay, yeah, we didn't have to.
I have a follow-up that wasn't really in the thing, so don't answer if you don't want to. But is the matchmaker the same as like same restrictions for arcade modes or competitive arcade modes? Because those queue times are really long if you play competitive arcade.
That's a good question. So probably your queue times are way worse because you're so high MMR.
Yeah.
I would guess. So if you think about it, every queue has some population, right? And if you're playing in competitive, you're playing in a very high population queue. And then if you go to
Right.
play in arcade, even though those ratings aren't the same, I'm imagining all of your ratings are pretty high. So when you go to play in arcade, you might not just be like the best, like, 1% of players or whatever. You'll be like the best 0.0001% of players at that point. Like you may actually be like the very best player queuing into, I don't know, Mystery
I
Heroes or
want to
No Limits
be
or
the
whatever,
very
whatever,
best
small mode that
buzz.
you're queuing into. And so like, yeah, that's a challenge. So we do actually have like, we're running the same matchmaking architecture across all of our queues, but they're configured a little bit differently. So arcade is supposed to be faster, and for most players it is. For very, very high MMR players, the problem is it's actually the same problem as the GMs at 3 a.m. where it's like,
Yeah.
if you're actually the best player in the queue, it's really hard to make a match that is like close to a 50% win chance for each team, right? And so that's the main problem. Hopefully we can do better though. We're definitely working on some changes that should give us a bit more fine-tuned control over arcade. And yeah, eventually, it's like, because at some point we got to just make a match, right? Especially in
Yeah.
arcade. So yeah, we'll hopefully be making that better over the next couple patches.
Sweet. That's so cool.
Still your turn because you had a follow up.
You can take this one, and then I'll take unless you want to do. I'll just go. Okay, sorry.
It doesn't matter.
Is it possible to have perfect matchmaking where every game is close?
That is a beautiful question. It's actually my favorite question. I think about this a lot, actually. Okay, so there's kind of like two pieces to this. One is like, can we make matches that look perfect on paper? And can we like ensure that all of the matches look perfect on paper? What I mean by that, nobody uses paper anymore, right? What I mean by that is like going into the match, the matchmaker will make a match and it'll have, the players'
Yes,
ratings
it's possible.
and all that
Halo
stuff.
3 did it.
And,
Halo 3's dog.
Going into that match, does the matchmaker predict that this is like a good match? Does this look like a good match? It's like all the ratings are really tight, all of that kind of stuff. That's the first part of the question. Second part is what actually happens. When the match actually gets played, how fair does it feel? And then I guess maybe like a third part would be like, how do we actually build something that gets as close as possible to the optimal? Yeah, I get to just nerd out on this one. This is like a TED Talk for me. So that first question. So how do we make matches that look good on paper? So right now, believe it or not, about 30% of the time when we make a match, it looks utterly perfect going into the match. Like all 10 players are like the exact same rating. That's like a 1 in 3rd chance. So if you like roll a dice and it's a 5 or a 6, it's like a perfect match. The matchmaker thinks so, anyways. And then about the next half of our matches are, I would say, pretty good. and like Roll Delta was really trying to make these matches better, because like, you know, if we're making a match where like literally everybody's rating is exactly the same, there's nothing better you can do, right? From the matchmaker's perspective. I'll get to, you know, what it actually ends up in a minute, because I'm sure chat is, I don't know, well, I shouldn't
Yeah.
speculate. I'm not watching chat. So those 50% of matches, generally we can ensure that they look fair, which is that like both teams are relatively balanced. Like, you know, there's no like dramatically better players on one team than the other or anything like that. And also, you know, with the postseason 3, that was when we made the roll delta changes that make it so that, you know, even though those matches are going to be a little bit wider, like they're going to have a wider skill distribution, they'll still end up having relatively matched roles. So that's like most of our matches, I would say, are either perfect or decent. And then there's like the 1/6 of matches that do not look great. And mostly those matches are the result of we were making a match around a really wide party, or we're making a match at 3 a.m. Or and I say 3 a.m., but you know that's also like you know, like we have like smaller regions like Australia, for example, where like their concurrency is just lower, right? And they're more isolated too. So it's like a lot harder for us to find good matches for them a lot of the time. So that's the matchmaker's view. Ultimately, we can make that a fair bit better. And most of that, actually, most of the advantages that we'll get going forward, like we already kind of know what makes a match look good on paper, right? I mean, obviously, you just make all the ratings the same, right? Mostly the advantages or like the benefits that we can get from the matchmaker going forward are around being a lot smarter about like, I could make this good match, but I don't want to, because if I make this match, I prevent myself from making these other good matches. And what I mean by that is like, you can imagine a case where like, say there's like 9 GM1s in queue and 9 GM5s in queue, and then a GM3 shows up. Intuitively, we should absolutely make the GM1 match with that GM3, because there's so many less GM1s. But we're not super intentional about that. And that's just one example. There's kind of like, there's a handful of different ways you can express this fundamental type of problem where like fundamentally what you want is a system that can kind of say like, I could make this match, but what are these other potential matches I could make? And you actually need to project in the future and say, you know, like how many players do I expect to, you know, show up in the next few minutes, and kind of like piece together like, you know, I really want to make a good GM1 match. Let me not accidentally pull some of these, you know, middle GM players into a lower match or something like that. And that's
I
where
don't
a
mind the
lot of
spam.
the
But if you
gains
guys
could
one
come
man
from
spam, I'm just
in
gonna time you guys out, and then you
like
guys
on
will
the
just be like,
matchmaking
not
side.
here.
But that is only going into the match. What ends up happening in the match is a lot more chaotic, because I'm sure most people would not say that a third of their matches feel perfect, right? Certainly a third of my matches don't feel perfect. In fact, actually, over the weekend, I was playing some comp, and I played a match that we like full held on point A, and then immediately took, you know, it was like Midtown. We immediately took, and I looked at the match, and it was actually one of these perfect matches, and I'm like, well, that didn't feel good, like, you know, and so then I'm like questioning like what, you know, what's actually, where I'm still trying to figure out what happened in that match. You know, I think maybe somebody was just not playing very well or something like that. And then that same night, actually, I was playing a match that didn't look very good on paper, but it was like one of the closest matches I've played in my life. So ultimately, like what ends up making a match feel good in practice is a little bit nebulous. And like, you know, for example, actually June, our data scientist or our data analyst, is working on this too. If we look at just matches that look completely perfect from the matchmaker's perspective, still something like 15% of them end in stomps. Depends on exactly how you measure, but something like 1 in 5, 1 in 6 look totally stompy in the result. And it's like, ultimately at that point, some of it could be like uncalibrated ratings, like if a new player comes in and we think there's some rating but they're actually not. There's a lot more that we can do on the rating side to be more fancy about like how we assess players coming into the system. But ultimately, I think some of it's just that Overwatch can be kind of a stompy game, right? Sometimes you get like momentum or somebody gets tilted and like, even if that match looked like it was going to be perfect, if somebody tilts a minute in, like there's nothing you can do, right? Like that match, the matchmaker couldn't have solved that problem, right? So, making like, I see a pretty clear path to like making much better matches on paper. I think we can keep making that better for a really, really long time. We can make meaningful progress kind of maybe forever, who knows. Figuring out exactly what makes a match that is like good in practice and not bad in practice, like when it's actually being played, that's like a much more open-ended problem. And that's something that we're probably we're going to be studying that for a long time. Doing actual science really about like, what makes an Overwatch match feel good. So yeah, I think I've probably talked enough. Gavin,
Yeah, that problem you just
You're
described,
good.
that's more my problem than Morgan's problem, right? Like that's like more on the design side. Maybe it's more on the hero design side, which isn't me specifically, but like there are design questions there that need to be solved. I think the original question one is every match going to be good? The answer is no. Morgan took a long time to say it, but no. At 3
It
a.m.
was really
GM
interesting
games
though.
are going to be bad. They just are because there are not enough of them. Like so, but that's kind of cheaty to say as well because like obviously those matches weren't going to be good. We think Morgan has a ton of ideas, and we actually on the design side have ideas too that we've already said some of them that can make the matchmaker smarter, and that's where we just need to keep making them better.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, you said something about like 15% of the games were like stomps. I was gonna say, do you actually see how many percentage of the games were actually like rolls?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we're not looking at the replays, right? We're just measuring statistics about the game. And so it's a little bit nebulous. Like sometimes a game can feel like a stomp, but like in my experience when playing, there's really multiple types of stomps, right? Like there's stomps where like, okay, we literally had no hope. I don't see how we could have possibly won this match.
I get that
And
a
then
lot.
there's the stomps. Yeah, hopefully we can make those go away over time. And then there's the stomps where it's like probably we could have actually won this match, but there was something like somebody was picking a hero or there was like some reason that like the match just wasn't going well and like, it's kind of the thing where like, if you imagine like at Overwatch League level, like, they play like best of fives all the time. And some of those matches look totally stompy, even if they go like 3 and
Right.
2 overall. And so it's really hard to disentangle stomps that are like that, where it's like the teams are actually balanced, but there's some kind of like thing that happened from like a stomp where it's like, okay, the matchmaker clearly screwed up here. Like, these players should not be in the same instance together. I think, ultimately in the long term, we can get rid of most of that type of stomp, where like it really was actually the matchmaker's fault. And that, I'm sure we're still we've, I think, improved that over the past few months. We've been focusing on trying to improve that a lot. Um, and it's hard, it's very hard to say, like, I don't have hard numbers to show, that that's actually gotten better or not. And I'm sure even if I did, probably people wouldn't really believe me. But I tend to feel like it's gotten a little better in my matches, but it's very anecdotal, right? But we're going to keep making that better, right? We're going to keep studying that problem, trying to keep making that, removing those from the game because they really shouldn't happen. We don't have to make those matches. That's really just like the matchmaker's not sophisticated enough to where we're able to like always know exactly what we're doing that causes that.
Yeah, just really quickly, I was thinking about what you said, like the Overwatch League example. I think Scott said this last time, and I thought it was super wise, which was, you know, one match really doesn't mean that much a lot of the time. Like if you're not playing a best of series, like you may not really know who the better team is 100% of the time.
That makes sense. Uh,
Yeah.
you want me to continue to the next one? or is that yours?
Yeah, you got it. You got
Oh,
those are the next two are yours. You got it.
the next
Sorry.
3?
Next two.
Oh, okay. So I'm just gonna ask them both at the same time. How does the system balance stacking, and would it be possible to balance it at the highest level in GM plus? And will you ever allow to GMs to stack again with friends, or like are we only gonna be limited to like duos?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So first, how do we balance stacking? So we used to really try to put like 5 stacks against 5 stacks, 4 stacks against 4 stacks. We actually kind of softened that quite a bit because one, we didn't find that stacking is actually all that. This will come as a shock to people. Stacking doesn't actually increase your chances of winning most of the time.
Really?
Like 4 stacks, well, at least in aggregate. I'm sure there are,
And like the
really
super high ranks, is it the same? Sorry to cut
well,
you
yeah,
off.
super high ranks. That's a different thing. But at like gold, for example, stacking doesn't actually increases your chance of winning. Yeah.
Wow, I always told like people, hey, you should stack in lower ranks and take advantage of it because in GM
I
you
mean,
can't. And like as long as
it's
like
more
you're,
fun.
it's your 5 stacking as well with a bunch of friends in lower ranks. At least you guys are gonna be like using your mics instead of getting those people who leave voice chat or like throw.
That's true, and also it's probably good for like if you want to learn how to play the game. I'm sure that stacking is like like keep stacking, like don't stop stacking. It's good, it's a good thing. But statistically, anyways, it doesn't give you like an overwhelming advantage or anything like that. So we still try to put groups against groups. There's a lot of reasons why doing that is good, both for the match and also for the matchmaker health overall. But now we're a lot more ready to put like a 5 stack against a 3 and a 2 or something like that. Because also, if you think about that, it's much more likely that we can find an actually balanced match. Because what was happening when we were put like only 5s against 5s, you're never going to find 2 5 stacks that are like actually closely matched. I mean, it happens, but it's very rare. Compared to kind of like if you imagine like the additional pool of potential matches that you can get from putting a 5 stack against like a 3 and a 2, because like things like roll deltas, like we can make matches that just are much more closely balanced if we relax that. So so that's how we balance stacking. As far as like at the very highest MMR, I mean, I had already talked about this a little bit, but there's a trade-off, right? If we were like, I don't have a strong philosophical stance. That's more of a design question about like, are the grouping restrictions we have in the game exactly right? Or like, should we change them? I'm the engineer. I don't make those calls. But from my perspective, there is a trade-off, right? If we relax the grouping restrictions, match quality will get worse. It's the sad truth. There's really not like we don't get anything for free there. Because ultimately, like the larger a group is, the harder it is to match because just the more constraints we have on it. There's less flexibility we have. If everybody's a solo in queue, we can match, and especially if everybody's a solo and everybody's flexed, you can imagine like we can make any match with any combination of players. We can kind of guarantee it's a much better match than if there's like this, set of 4 players that must be on one team together or something like that. So, yeah, I think I can hand it over to Gavin. He's probably got a nice design insight.
No, I think that's enough for that question. I think we'll see what else they ask.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's good. Yeah.
Okay, I got the next one. Should there be anything in place to stop people from playing against each other many times in a row? Like, especially in high ranks, there's times where you'll play against the same person for 5 games straight.
That's actually that's very similar to my last answer. There's trade-offs. This is pretty much only a problem that happens at GM. Like if you think about gold, there's like so many gold players that all you have to do is like as long as you don't queue at like the exact same moment, the chances of you getting like, I mean, maybe you'll get like twice in a row or something like that, but like the odds of you playing the same player like more than twice in a row at gold is like, I don't actually know, but it's super small. So this is really only a problem at GM. And ultimately the the downside, if we were to fix this, is that it's kind of like avoids or something, where like we're just adding more ways in which we're not able to make matches, and that's ultimately going to affect match quality. So it is a trade-off. Like, it's something we could do. I'm not sure whether you actually want it, or like whether that's actually going to help. Right? Yeah, it's hard.
Okay, you got the next ones, Jay. There's like 3 in a row.
3 in a row. Wait, all these?
Yeah. Nope. These are the ones you made. Yeah. But I can see one if you want.
Yeah, take the first one. Take the first one, and I'll do the next 2.
Okay. Are you ever gonna bring back Group Finder for the people who do want to LFG for people to play with?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So
I do
LFG
miss
had
the
some
LFG.
social, like, disruptive behavior problems that we never solved. So, like, I don't know if you guys have seen what's happening with like custom games right now that we're trying to solve, where like I think we've mostly fixed it, but we're getting to the we've had a ton of like really disruptive titles and like game modes and stuff like that. And so LFG didn't have any of those protections in place, basically. And we still hadn't like actually solved those problems when we did the switch from like the Overwatch 2 release date, when we decided to release PvE or PvP early. And we still haven't really solved those problems today. So when we were doing like the engine upgrade of Overwatch 2, every UI element had to go through that process, like everything, and LFG's a ton of UIs. So we decided that launching with competitive 2.0 and ping and stuff like that was like more important than LFG. I think we still really like the idea of LFG and we'd like to bring it back, but it hasn't been a priority so far.
LFG was also really, I mean, Gavin touched on how complicated the UI was, but as the server engineer, it was very complicated on the server too. Like, it was just a really big feature, and I think especially once we shipped role queue, we had all those like fancy role constraints and all that. It was a really big thing. So yeah, ultimately it was like, I think long term we would love to find more ways to like help players connect with each other and stuff, but it's like figuring out that perfect solution, or at least the least cursed solution, is going to be a big priority.
That makes sense.
I don't know if anyone in Overwatch 2 or the new players would know this, but a long time ago we had a preferred player that allowed you to be like, and get on that person's team more. Would you guys see that one coming back in? I know that's like an OG question.
That is, yeah, that's a long way back. So that's a funny one, because at the time, we were trying to do this thing. I think internally we were kind of calling it like social matchmaking, where it was like, oh, you happened to play with this player, so we're going to kind of remember that, and then if you happen to play with them again, we'll kind of like gradually make it so that eventually you're this person's rival, and like you're always in this player's match. And it's funny because like when we had that initially, people were really confused. They were like, why is this player always in my match? I don't think we necessarily described the feature very well to players at the time. And then also, it ends up being that like at GM, there's a small enough population to where you do actually see the same player. But like at Gold, the percentage of players that you play with, like imagine you're playing like today and then you play tomorrow, like the people that you're playing with tomorrow, like that person's not online anymore, right? And so there was like this weird consistency problem where like it worked not well enough for most players and then too well for like some players. It was this very strange thing. And it also, speaking of expensive things on the server, that was like a really complicated server feature, because we basically made a whole social network, yeah, which in hindsight, maybe wasn't the best use of our time. So I don't think we'll ever bring that back, but I think the idea was cool. And
Bro,
so like,
can you
if
guys
there's
like
ways that we
drop
can,
this thing that's going on in my chat? I
re-express that
also
idea
wrote
in
on
a
my
new
Twitter, if you guys have
system
any
that
questions,
maybe
let me
works
know so I
better,
can ask them
gives us
today.
more
If you
the
guys didn't
things
ask
that we
any
want.
questions on my Twitter, then
I
it's
think
your
we're
fucking fault
definitely
as well.
thinking
So
about,
if you're not
like,
following
what
my
we can
Twitter as
do
well,
there.
take the L. Sorry. Jesus Christ. So much like fucking useless bullshit going on in my chat,
This
dude. Like
meeting.
literally hold the L. If you didn't ask a question, it's not gonna be asked
He's
today.
talking to his chat.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
you got the next one again.
Okay, so this was actually really cool, and you guys did it for a little bit of time, but I think this also helps combat with the private profile situation. There was a feature for a little bit in Overwatch 1 that allowed you to hover over people's career profile, but if they were private, you couldn't, like, obviously see, but it showed you the heroes that they played. Would that be able to come back so we could, like, build team comps around people who, like, we can't look at their profile?
Yeah, I missed that one too, actually. So, when we did like an overhaul of like public and private profile settings at some point, and we actually inadvertently broke that, and then we didn't catch it for a really long time. This is way back in Overwatch 1. Um, and so at the time we didn't have like the bandwidth to bring that back, and the basically the way it had worked before kind of got fundamentally broken by like the way that we changed profile private settings, privacy settings. That said, I really miss that feature. I would love to bring something like that back. It's just figuring out like I don't think we'll ever bring back exactly what that was, but like having the ability to like show people what heroes you play or something like that sounds really cool to me, and I would love to build something like that.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't that long, but I remember it was a really like cool feature to look at. Like, you didn't have to go to like review someone's profile, or even if they were private, you get to see everyone's characters that they played. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
we
letting
are.
people choose.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. What SK just said, actually, the letting people choose thing. That's something we've been thinking about. So like nothing to promise there, but like it would be nice if you could sort of represent yourself the way you want to be represented there. And so that's something we're considering.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay, next one. Is there going to be a way to tell how far we are from overtaking people in top 500? Like, there's no way to tell how many wins you need from rank 100 to 99.
Yeah, that's a funny one actually. We have a meeting to talk about that later today. Morgan and I do actually. So, yeah. So there's not exactly a plan yet. There's a plan is being planned. In season 4, we're going to show GM players how far away they are from the 500th spot on the leaderboard if you're not top 500. But that didn't answer your question. So we're thinking about it.
That answered part of it. That's really cool. Sweet.
Is there any plans to bring back like a number that we can see instead of just a GM5, like 4032 SR or something?
That's an interesting one. So, so in season 4, we're kind of, like when you get a rank update, we'll be showing you a more granular like percentage of that rank update, like where you are in your division. So hopefully that kind of helps some of that desire. It's funny, like, I know a lot of players were unhappy about us removing SR, but from like the matchmaking end, it actually gave us a whole lot of flexibility. I don't think we've ever really talked about this, but like when we, like in ranked, when we had SR, SR was kind of like tied to MMR, right? Like they kind of moved pretty much the same way. And because of that, our hands were kind of tied when it came to like expressing players' uncertainty and things like that, because players really expected kind of like a consistent amount of SR. Like, if you won and you went up 20 SR and then you lose and you go down 30 SR, like players are going to be, that's going to be like very confusing, right? And so you're probably not going to be happy about that. Ultimately, like hiding that let us make the rating system a whole lot smarter in how it deals with like uncertainty, because basically we kind of like we had made it so that the rating system wasn't actually working optimally to kind of like make sure that we are giving players kind of a fairly consistent MMR update. So now what we're doing is like ratings can move faster in ranked. We're able to like move much faster if we're less certain about a player. Because like we don't have to show players that per match update anymore. We're also able to like there's all these fancy things if you look up like what's it called, Glyco. There's like other rating systems that we've incorporated ideas from that, like instead of looking at one match, you're looking at like a collection of matches, and there's like very fancy things you can do kind of with that signal that we're able to do because we don't have to just show you like, you won, your rating went up by this amount. And so I don't know if that answered your question at all, but That's
take a stab at that one too. So like on the one hand, MMR is like our best guess about your skill, right?
Okay.
But we also know that that's like far from perfect. That's just a best guess. So it's only ever comparing you to players you played against. Morgan has said this recently, but like one of the whole purposes of building a system like this is so that we can rate people, one person against a population of many millions, but they've only played against maybe a few thousand of those ever, so like rating them against all those people is kind of the goal there. So it won't be perfectly accurate even with thousands of games. And like from psychologically, we as humans, we want to see that number. Like we want to know the number, even though I'm telling you it's not perfect, you still want to see it, right?
Yeah.
So then on the other hand, I'm human too, and I'm hearing feedback from you guys, the content creators, from the community. I'm reading Twitch chat right now, my own real life friends, like coworkers, so like as a system designer, I have a privilege to be able to do that. So I do go and look at my MMR. Like I want to see that number. I want to see my friend's MMR. I want to understand the system as well as possible, right? And that helps us improve things. But I also know looking at it that it's imperfect, and that like if we showed that people would say, well, this isn't quite right or that isn't quite right. These two people compared to each other aren't quite right. Well, maybe they've never played against each other before. A few weeks ago, Andy showed me a game. Community manager Andy showed me a game that he was in, and I showed that to Morgan, and we were like, oh, that was a mistake. That shouldn't have gone that way. And so like some of the things that went out with season 3, I would say would have fixed that game. But so we are looking at it, and I feel you, and that's why we are making changes.
So going back to what you were saying though, would you ever allow hypothetically for, let's say, GMs to 5-stack again?
Yeah. That one. So this is the flats question, right? Like
Yeah.
the inevitable. I say with flats, this is a bingo question. So this is one we're like constantly debating internally. We know how bad it feels to not be able to play with your friends. Eskay says don't do it. So
how's that the flags question?
we
I
know other
always
games
ask
have
that.
solutions for this. The grouping restrictions, like Morgan said, give us a lot of match quality when he was talking about that earlier. So like we kind of ensure that people are playing against the best matched person in GM. And I want to just go down the GM rabbit hole for a second here, because we start to get into like a stratosphere of skill, right? Like GM, things get weird when people are that good. And the metrics we had that told us about win rates before start to apply less and less. So like I'm sure Jay and Eskay know, but like we have at GM, we have OWL players, we have contenders players, we have streamers. All those people are often top 500, but like there's like layers there, right? OWL players tend to beat contenders players, tend to beat some streamers. It depends on the streamer and what they're doing. But like you guys are talking to your chat, I get it. Like you have a lot going.
See, yeah, I never
you
lost
can't
anything in my life,
all the time. So like we have those layers, and we want to match them as closely as we can against each other, right? So like allowing big stacks means the matchmaker maybe can't actually find a match that is fair. Like if the stack is big enough, then if it's 3 OWL players, for example, maybe there aren't 3 OWL players on the other team to match against. So that's all to say that we acknowledge how badly it sucks not to be able to play with your friends, and right now we don't have a plan to change this rule, but we do have plans. We are thinking about ways that let GM players play together in a competitive setting that isn't necessarily our regular competitive role queue.
Ooh, okay. Actually, that's really funny that you say that, because I remember when Lucio Ball came back, and me, Flats, and Emong actually wanted to trio Lucio Ball, but we couldn't because our MMR,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was unfortunate.
So, yeah, with Lucio Ball, that one is like, so going back in time, let's go back to the beginning of time for a second, to like 2017.
Okay.
At the beginning of Overwatch, like we probably made a kind of a bad choice when we initially set up the way that MMR worked for Lucio Ball. And so bringing that in kind of from other game modes that it didn't necessarily apply to. And then moving forward, we've made better choices where Lucio Ball ratings apply to Lucio Ball ratings. So like your modern Lucio Ball is like based on your previous Lucio Ball. But in the future we do want to do better with that. And like let's say we make a new version of Lucio Ball that's Lucio Football or whatever, like then like that would ideally pull from or not pull from previous anything. It would probably be more like a clean slate, or have a new solution, right? That's not necessarily putting you in that same predicament.
Although we're always going to be, I think, when we seed like your ranked like for Mystery Heroes, we did this too, right? Where like your ranked Mystery Heroes rating, we were looking at some of your other ranked ratings to try to inform where to put that because like honestly, it's like there's like the nice idea of putting everybody at like gold 3 or whatever and like people figure it out, but like match quality is not good if we do that. Like however bad match quality is, it gets a lot worse if we do that. It's kind of the same thing as like an MMR reset. And so we do kind of like look at your other ranks in order to kind of give a sense of like where we're supposed to start you out, but you're still moving around really fast at the beginning, so you'll get to where you need to be if you play enough matches.
Okay.
Well, okay, next one. How fast does MMR catch up to SR? If you go on a huge loss streak and drop, where would your MMR be? Would you match with Diamond Plat players, or does MMR swing more slowly?
I just want to say
That's
that was a
really
question from Twitter as well. Someone actually.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
actually,
stole it from Jay's chat.
before I let Morgan go on that one, let me just remind people that MMR and SR are not the same thing. They're two different numbers.
So someone
And
on
in
Twitter
season 4,
actually
they
gave a
will
good
be
question.
almost exactly the same thing. So yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, MMR and rank. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. That's a good Twitter user. That was a good question. So yeah, I touched a little bit on this, but like back when we had SR that we were showing to players, like the SR and the MMR, they weren't exactly the same, but they moved very similarly, and that did kind of constrain us. So now, we added things like momentum and uncertainty about like basically it's like if you win or lose 9 games in a row, something's probably wrong. So we are actually moving your ratings faster. I can't tell you exactly how fast, how many matches it would take you to go from like, one rank to another, but it will be faster. And we're actually trying to make it faster still. Like we're like the ideal case is ratings move as fast as they possibly can without having the bad downsides of like players swinging around all over the place wildly. But ideally we want players to get to where they're supposed to be as quickly as possible. And so like at this point it's much more based on like how many matches have you played recently. If you haven't played at all, we're more uncertain about you. If you've played like 100 matches, we're less uncertain about you. It's things like how much of a win or loss streak are you on. If you're winning 10 matches in a row, you're going to get more rating than if you win just one match in a row, something like that. And we're kind of constantly adding new signals to that process, to that system, to try to make it smarter, because ultimately we want kind of this very detailed view of like how well do we think we understand you as a player. Well, not everything about you, but just how good you are at the video game. So yeah, hopefully that's a good enough answer.
So I'm gonna hit you with a curveball here, though. So, do you think there will ever be an MMR reset?
No, we're not. We're never gonna reset MMR. So
It's worth a try.
ultimately, I think the best way forward is to make ratings move faster, because the faster ratings move, the faster we're picking up on, like right now, if you win like 60% of your matches and you lose 40% of your matches, your rating's moving up, but it's moving up kind of slow because you're not like wildly, like you're not winning 100% and you're not winning 0%, right? So ultimately, like we want players to get to where they're roughly in the right ballpark of their skill, which like I said, ends up where they'll end up winning about 50% of their matches. It just in some cases it just takes too long, and players can feel stuck, right? Ultimately, I think we'll be able to make ratings move faster, but we never want to throw out like the whole system, right? Like the whole system actually has a whole lot of knowledge because we have millions of players. Yeah, I think I had said this on the interview, but like we have millions of players and most of them have never actually played each other. And so it's like that knowledge about all of those relationships is encoded in the existing MMRs. We just need to be better at, like, if you're where you're not supposed to be, we need to move you faster. We need to figure that out faster. And so that's the problem that we really want to solve. We don't want to just reset MMRs, because that doesn't actually solve the problem. That just gets us back to square one, and then the problem's not actually solved.
Yeah. And to go back to something we said earlier, MMR's Decay is a system we implemented in Overwatch 2 that was kind of new there when we launched Overwatch 2, and that system is still in place today. So, this is it's like a form of soft reset, because when we decay you, we lower your MMR and we increase our uncertainty about your MMR. So we say not only are they probably worse, but we don't really know exactly that maybe they left and they played Apex, the whole time, and like maybe their shooter skills have gone up, and while we weren't paying attention to them. So that means when a player does return, their wins and losses will cause bigger MMR swings up or down. So long story short, we are kind of resetting you in small ways all the time.
Yeah, it's a really good way to look at it.
Okay, that makes sense. And a very important question that I had as well is, do you guys ever think that there will be cards at the end of the game again? It was a great addition to the game, and I'm kind of sad that it's gone.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So we liked the cards quite a lot, but we also knew that at the end of Overwatch 1, almost no one was looking at them. Everybody would leave before the game, before the cards would happen. So they were cool. I think they were really cool when Overwatch 1 launched, and people saw them and they were like, oh man, this is such a neat system. But a few years into it, people were just hitting leave when the victory and defeat popped up. So we'd love to find a way to bring something like that back, but we would like it to be more meaningful, more permanently meaningful, instead of just kind of gimmicky where not as many people cared. And we know some people still cared, but but we've been thinking about that. So yeah, we're definitely talking about that on the system design side.
Okay, cool.
I think also, if you think about it, the end of round, kind of that whole flow in Overwatch 1 was a very long, that took a really long time to get through. And now we may have made it a little bit too short. It's like you finish the game, play the game, and then you're out. Maybe there's a good middle ground there.
Yeah,
it's definitely something we've been talking about.
At the end of the game, I have games where people are talking, complimenting each other and whatnot, or they're trying to have a conversation, but they have to talk so fast to try to get their conversation done before the game shuts off. So
I just saw a good question from Jay's chat, which was why remove it? And that it wasn't that it was really removed. It was that I mentioned it earlier. Every UI element had to be rebuilt in Overwatch 2 because new engine. So was it worth rebuilding if people aren't using it? And that's the question we asked ourselves. And ultimately we didn't think so. And we do hear the feedback that people liked it, and we want to bring something like that back, but just again, maybe in a way that is more meaningful.
Okay, cool.
Okay, last one. How in depth does the matchmaking go? Can it or does it account for people being one tricks, having two of the same one trick on one team, or Junkrat one trick being really bad on one map versus really good on another?
Yeah. So no, basically. It only takes into account role, not hero. So it doesn't know which hero you're going to pick when you get in a game. There's nothing in the matchmaker, literally anywhere, that says, oh, this person is a Junkrat one trick or whatever. It doesn't know how many times you played Junkrat. It has no biased hero selection at all. The only thing we have is win rate expressed through MMR. So when someone wins a lot on Junkrat, then that, especially if they get maps that are Junkrat favored, then we might see their MMR go up quite a bit. But then if they get a bad map for Junkrat, then that'll affect their MMR too. It's likely that it might go down because of a loss. So we think that knowing which heroes to pick on which maps is part of your growth as a player in Overwatch, and that should translate into your MMR. Fingers crossed. So
don't be a one trick.
That's the idea.
That makes sense.
We never want to we never want to get too detailed, because ultimately if we're doing something like that, we're kind of making assumptions about what a player is going to do, or how they're going to behave, and that's not really something that I feel like we shouldn't be doing that, right? We should never be making an assumption on the player's behalf that could be wrong. The way the MMR works is kind of we're kind of looking at the smallest amount of information we can about a player, because we want to kind of ensure fairness. So, like Gavin said, that player will end up kind of at the MMR of a Junkrat one trick, right? And so, that's kind of how the system will end up working for that.
That makes sense.
Last question, if you don't mind, because chat was bothering me about it earlier. Do you guys ever think you're gonna add ranked icons back to the game? Like, beginning, when the game starts, it shows everyone's rank, or even bottom left when someone's watching me on stream, they don't know what rank I am.
That's a maybe, I guess. Like it's not one we're planning to do right now because we actually have some other ideas for that space. So you've heard, probably Jared talk a little bit about what we want to do to improve player progression and stuff like that. We've been thinking about using that for other things, that space in particular, which is kind of one of the reasons why we haven't seen anything from that yet. So that one's still TBD, but this goes back to that idea that we know that progression doesn't feel super good in the game right now. Like the battle pass progression feels pretty good, but once you're done with the battle pass, there's not a lot that's happening in the background there, and that's a problem we know we need to solve. So yeah, that's we removed the profile level, in Overwatch 1, removed/retired because it was kind of a thing that made people a little bit disruptive. But yeah.
I
Okay,
have a
awesome.
follow-up
Thank you.
for that because so many people. Oh wait, you go.
Oh, really quick, I had one more thing to say about that, which was we are in season 4 going to be showing the average rank of a match on the loading screen.
Ooh,
So
okay.
when you see the 10 players, in the middle, we'll be showing you the average rank. I don't know, maybe one day we'll get back to showing the rank of the individual players. There were kind of some downsides with that. And so this is kind of the first step. So it's like, tell us what you think about this. Is it enough information? Is it not enough information? But we definitely hear players' feedback that like they want to kind of get a sense of like what kind of lobby they're in, and we want to provide that feedback too. So
is it going to be like for one team, or is it both teams?
It's just both teams. It's just like the average of the entire match.
Okay.
Would it for GM1 lobbies? Would it just say GM1? Because there's a really big difference between like a top 10 or a really low GM1.
Yeah, right now the system will only say GM1. We don't do like leaderboard. Maybe in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a follow-up for that, because I swear everyone in the community is saying this. You're not hiding ranks to like hide how bad matchmaking is or whatever. That's what everyone says. Like that's not why they're hidden, right?
No,
no, and well, I mean, we already talked about how the we know MMR is imperfect, right? Like we know that it's not a perfectly accurate stat because it's trying to capture a segment of the population to represent you again against millions. So like there will be times when you get faced off against someone that beats you that was lower MMR than you because it didn't have a concept of you versus that other person. So like, but no, no.
No, yeah, when we were designing the Comp 2.0, like ultimately we had a lot of ideas for like what we wanted to do, and we didn't ultimately get a lot of them in the game to ship. So we had this kind of idea of like more like a seasonal progression where you felt like you were getting, ranking up. Because a lot of the feedback we got in Overwatch 1 was like, hey, my SR is the same that it's been for the past 5 seasons. And it's like, well, ultimately relative to the rest of the player base, you're not actually getting better at the game or something. But like, that also doesn't feel very satisfying. So we were trying to kind of solve that type of problem. But I think we, ultimately the solution was, not perfect, and so we're season 4 we're changing that because of that feedback, right? So hopefully season 4 makes it clear that we were not trying to hide bad matchmaking or anything like that. We were just trying to make a feature that gave people a little more of a sense of progression.
I don't want to take too much of your guys' time as well, so feel free to stop me, but I know you guys talked about also bringing it back, but how about the on fire? I know it's like voice for the characters are still in the game.
Yeah. So that'll the VO, like you said, is still hooked up. The on-fire system is in the design process right now, so that's on my team. And we're thinking about it. Like how do we bring that back in a way that like one thing that we didn't love about the old system was the meter, for example. Like the meter was confusing. So that probably isn't something that comes back in the same way, but we're still in design discussions about a good way to bring fire back. But to be clear, we really like the fire system, and I think we all do want to bring it back. We don't have a date for you.
Oh yeah, no problem. I just loved seeing what it looked like. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Can I ask one more to keep you here?
Okay, last
I'm
question.
Are there any plans on the career profile to change the peak from like rank on the leaderboard? Because there's such a huge difference between top 10 when the leaderboard first comes out versus top 10 at the end of
Oh,
the season.
that's
So
an interesting
someone's
question.
peak would be like way different at the start versus the end.
Even
I
know
hadn't
that
actually heard
happened.
that feedback before. Yeah, that's a really
No,
interesting one. We'll have to think
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Thanks. Sorry, it's not one I'd considered. But we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We
Awesome.
Good.
Well, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. You guys
thank
were
you so
amazing. It was
much.
fun to pick your guys' brains. Appreciate it.
This is
Thanks
so
for having
cool.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We're really happy to do it.